One of the great things about DAX, the data expression language within Power BI, is that it's very, very powerful and has lots of very useful functions, especially for defining things like time-based calculations, year to date or year over year, those sort of calculations. It's also very powerful in that you just define that thing once, and then you can slice it by as many different fields as you want from your data model. Let's take a look at how to define some of those expressions. I've created a simple crosstab report here where I've got months down the columns on the, down the rows on the left-hand side here, and I've got each of our years across the top. And if I grab the revenue field out of our sales table and just drop that into values, you can see I get a different value for each of the months. So, in January we sold 9 million, February was 12 million, March was 20, 23, etc. What if I wanted to do a year-to-date calculation and get a running sum of these across these months? Well, I can do that by creating a new measure. Measures are calculations that exist within your Power BI model. And to create one, come up to the ribbon and you'll find this new measure button. We'll pop open the expression editor again, and you can start typing in here. So this is going to be our year-to-date revenue. And again, like I said, there's plenty of functions and expressions in this language that help you build these things. So for example, we've got these three total month-to-date, total quarter-to-date, and total year-to-date functions that help do these time-based calculations. I want to do a year-to-date, so I'm going to hit Tab, and you'll see that once I start typing these formulas, I get a little tooltip that tells me what I need to put in, what parameters I need for this formula. So the expression that I want to evaluate is actually the sum of the sales revenue. So I'm going to get a total year-to-date sum of sales revenue. So I'll type sum, and then go and find the column. Well, it's the revenue column that I want. As I start typing that, you see it's filtered down the options. And there's two here. There's the international sales table that I had before, which I don't need. It's the sales revenue column from that table that I want. Close my brackets. And the next thing that I get asked for is the dates. What are the dates which date column do I want to use to do this sum over? Well, the one that I want is my date column from my date table. The other great thing that I can do in this editor, if I need to, is do things like adding in extra line breaks and things that just help make it easier to read. So you can hit Alt and Enter and put this onto a separate line. Makes things a little easier to read and to understand. Again, let's format this one nicely in much the same way. So there's my measure created, and you can see it appears here in the fields on the right-hand side. Now actually, it's put that into the date table. It doesn't matter where these measures exist or where they live. They always return the same calculation. They're kind of independent of tables, but we have to put them somewhere in this field list. And you can change which home table they map to if you want to. So I can move that into my sales table, and now it'll appear under sales at the bottom along with revenue and units, which is a more logical place to put it. It's where somebody would probably look for this information. So to use it, all I need to do is drag that into my values field as well. And now I can see my report has got a running sum across all of the different months, adding up to a total at the bottom of the year. And you can see this was sliced by year. Let me just close this out of the way. You can see this was sliced by year here, but I could equally go and recalculate this for any other slice of my data. So if I wanted to look at it by product category, for example, let's just create another quick chart down the bottom for our product category, turn that into a slicer. And now when I choose different product categories, this is automatically recalculated. If you think about how you would have had to do this in Excel, you'd have had to have a separate calculation for each product category. It's very, very simple using these calculations. You define it once and it works everywhere. Let's take a look at some other calculations you could do here. Typical sort of finance scenario, I might want to go through let's look at the same period last year, and then let's look at a variance between those two things. I'll start with last year's year-to-date calculation. So again, let's create a new measure. Last year's year-to-date. And we'll use a function here called the calculate function. The calculate function, it's kind of one function to rule them all. You'll find you'll use this in as many complex calculations and many times that this will become useful. What calculate allows you to do is say, I'm going to provide a particular expression and then evaluate that with a bunch of filters on it. So for example, I might say here, I'm just going to evaluate that year-to-date calculation that we had before, but I'm going to modify it and filter it to just look at the same period last year. We've even got this function here built in for the same period last year. Makes it really easy to just say, what was my year-to-date revenue for the same period last year? Now this one got created in the date table again, so I'm just going to move that into our sales table. So I've got this year's and last year's year-to-date for a particular period. The next thing I might want to do is look at a difference between those, and then we'll do a percentage calculation. So we'll create a new measure for the difference between them. I've got my handy reference so that I don't have to remember how to type in this formula. This is our year-to-date sales variance versus last year's year-to-date. What do they call this field? Just simply one minus the other. And then my last one is going to be my year-to-date sales variance as a percentage. And I'm going to just divide one by the other. We use this divide function to avoid any divide by zero errors. Just means that it can deal with if there's any divide by zero errors. You can give some other result. We're not going to worry about this in this case. So now I've got my year-to-date as a percentage of the same period last year. Let's put that onto a chart. Make a bit more space. Waterfall chart's probably a good one for this. I can drop that year-to-date sales variance percentage in as a value. And let's look at this over years. There we go. So I can see, year over year, there were some increases. We had a few decreases at the end of the first decade of the 2000s. And then it went up again, but we had a big dip in 2015. So I've created some really complex calculations there. I've used a whole set of different functions, and you've seen how there's some built-in functions that help you deal with things like rolling sums over time, the same period last year, and things that can provide some very complex calculations where you're filtering and ignoring filters from different contexts. Really, really useful, and a great way of enhancing and enriching the data models that you're producing.